Hello, hi. So welcome to my channel. So this is a new playlist of authentication mechanism where I will discuss the authentication mechanism and how each authentication mechanism works under the hood. And so see, uh, if you see every product, where you register and after registering you logged in, right? And once you logged in and you either way you are logged in via you enter the password username and password and you logged in and subsequent request will get authenticated via session and right. So how it's work, what is the session and what is the cookies uh, and different way of uh, authenticate the application. So that's the video about it. So let's discuss all its mechanism one by one. So I will try to like cover it in two one part. If it's more than like 30 minutes, then I will break down video into two parts. Okay, so let's jump into the uh, documents. Okay, so let's say jump into the documents I have created for the authentic identity system. And okay, so this is what. So so honestly, almost every login on internet run on some combination of these, right? These are the mechanism that I have listed here. So so this is what I have written down here. So first I will walk you through what I am targeting to discuss in this video. So so I will discuss the authentication flow using username and password. So it is the way for the user to prove the knowledge of the secret. Okay. So password is the way you prove the knowledge of the secret. Suppose you have you have created a system, you are trying to build a authentication on top of that so that uh, only authenticated user will get access for that your product or your website, right? So either you build that uh, authentication mechanism via username and password. Either you store the password and username and you authenticate that user in your system, or you will like delegate that authentication related thing to any third party uh, like Gmail or GitHub, that the OAuth 2. Okay, so where you will delegate the responsibility of authentication that to any third party server that will tell you is the user is legitimate or not. Okay, so OAuth 2 is delegated authorization framework, right? Your application delegate the authorization related things to any third party software, any third party server. Okay, that will authorize whether the user is able to or valid one or not. And once you see OAuth 2 is a framework and it will always use with the combination of the OpenID, which is the OIDC in short form. So OIDC is built on top of OAuth 2 that tells the identity about the authenticated user. Okay. And so in this video, I will discuss the session cookies, JW2, JWT, what is the JWT, and SAML. SAML is basically is a SSO protocol. It's XML based protocol that used in SSO. So I will discuss what is the SSO and how it will use. Uh, so I will discuss in subsequent uh, in few minutes. Let me go through the what is the form. MFA. Okay, MFA is the last one. So it's a like mechanism which basically use with the combination of the one of these mechanism. Okay, so it's a policy that's like, if you uh, authenticate at one step, then second step it will prompt you MFA, multi-factor authenticate authentication, right? Once you uh, authenticated at one layer, then at second step you will prompted on a MFA as per MFA policy. Either it will prompt you a SMS code on SMS, your SMS, or on email, or maybe it can be on OTP on a authenticator app. You will enter that code, then you will get successfully authenticated. Okay, so it's a double extra guard in a authentication mechanism. Okay, so let me discuss what is the foundation that you must know before going further about uh, authentication mechanism. So uh, if you see STT itself doesn't remember the user, right? If you see this example, if you logged into the any website, so let's suppose you logged in an Amazon website, right? And once you logged in, you visit the your profile, you visit the order page and you product page, and if you see, that's the in a browser, if you inspect the browser, you see the host name and the what is the path, and this is the single, right, that doesn't carry about your information. So so it's not remember who is the user, right? So basic browser session flow, so where the browser session comes into picture, how each request uh, tells the server who is the user trying to access this resource. Okay, so that the browser session will tell you the server. Okay, so once user is authenticated from authenticated authentication server, then it will send you a session ID that will store in a browser cookies, and for any subsequent request, browser automatically add that uh, session cookie in request, and that session ID server will look into that it's a session DB session store, whatever the DB of session, and if it find out that any valid information and it validated, then that request will get validated. Okay, so if you see, I have the which let the server place the state in a user agent, and cookies let the browser return the matching cookies and a future request. Okay, so if you in a federated application, uh, don't like confused about the what is the federated, I will discuss in when I will discuss this SSO topic, what is the federated, what mean by it. So if you in that case you have a two session, one for the IDP, one for the SP, which is the application, and IDP who is the identity provider for that user who trying to log in to the application. Okay, so this is the normal flow you will generally see if you the inspect the browser, and you see the network tab. Once you go to network tab, you can see all the activity behind the scene. Okay, so this is the work flow diagram. uh, you open application on a browser, and suppose you click on account, and it will check if whether a session exists or not. Your application will check. If session doesn't exist, then it will redirect you to login page, and on login page it doesn't matter who which login page belong to. Maybe it belong to the your application server, maybe it can be a third party. I will discuss that mechanism in later. Okay, so once you redirected, it will redirect you to login page. You enter the credential. Once you enter a credential like username and password, and if it MFA is enabled, then you will also like enter the MFA code. Once all these step done, then your application or server will verify its credential and it's create a session id and user, whatever the like user id and what the role of that user, it will store in a session store. Okay, db, it can be redis, whatever the like storage. Okay, so it mapped to that user and it is return the that session id to the browser, and browser will save that session id in its cookies. For subsequent any request, it will send that session id, and then server will just look up that session id into session store and will it found and authenticate that user and return that means whatever the account page. Okay, so that's the basic flow of the authentication. Okay, so this is all about the basic mechanism. So what I wanted to discuss. So let me just go to the what is the username and password, how it works. Okay, so this is basic one of the authentication mechanism. So suppose you building an app, okay, or an app or a website. So your authentication mechanism, like you are authenticating the user via username and password. How will you store the password and how will you authenticate that user? Okay, that the flow I will discuss here. Okay, so I have like mentioned here what the actual meaning of these things. Okay, username. So username is like which account are you claiming? Okay, so username is denoting uh, in terms of system which account are you claiming, right? So that's mean if you are like if you have multiple product, if you have multiple product, maybe you have some like user may have one account for product one, user have another account for product two. That can happen if product is specific authentication we have. Okay, so this is what, and password prove that you control the secret of that account. Okay, that's the meaning in terms of system. Okay, so how you will design authentication mechanism in password username and password flow. So password registration flow first. What is the how will you do password registration flow? So once user register to your application, how what happened behind the scene? Okay, user choose a username and password according to the what are the username policy and password policy you will show on a UI. According to that, you will be choose username and password and enter the browser. Once register, your application will validate password policy and generate cryptography and random salt. I will tell you why salt needed. Okay, random salt, and this will your system will not store whatever the password user register enter in his registration. You will not like save password as it is into ODB. You will store its hash password. Okay. So you will use the solo hash function due to the security concern so that it can't be like try to brute force hack the password. It will be not so easy. That's why solo password we will prefer to use. And solo password take your password and salt and cost and it give the password hash. That password hash you will store in your database along to user db, and along what you will you store in your user db, you will store hash password and you will store salt and cost. Okay, I will tell you why you need salt and cost to store in user db. And And algorithm, that's algorithm also, you will also store the algorithm, what the algorithm you have used for that user to generate a hash password hash. Okay, once you save, you return a successful registration. Okay, so why salt? That's the question. Suppose your system have like millions of users. Okay, and you don't know, maybe user 1 and user 2 somehow entering the same password. Okay, at time of registration. So without password, your hash function will give the same hash password value. Okay, so that's the security concern. Okay, so that's why we will use a unique salt for each password that guarantee generate a different password hash, even user enter the same password. Okay, so both will be different in case stored in our system DB. Okay, so what will be salt? What is salt? Salt is unique per password record. Okay, so once you uh, register user, for each user you will generate random number for the salt, and that will be stored along with the password hash, so that once user try to log in and enter password, you will get again like generate hash for that password and compare to that whatever they store in DB. Okay, so this is what like Argon to modern memory hard password hashing function describe the IRFTF. So this is one modern that mostly used. And password flow login, how password flow login works. Okay, server doesn't decrypt the stored password. Okay, so once the user have registered to your system, and after registering, then user try, then login, right? Once user login, every time after register, once every time once user login, it enter username and password. Okay, yeah, then your system will what the system will do, so your system will do the take the user record for that username, and get the what was the salt and what was the cost, and algorithm hash algorithm function that used for that password hash, and use enter a new password and compare with it. Once it equal, then user is authenticated, otherwise you will prompt is unauthorized, unauthenticated. Okay, so that's the password flow login. User enter a password and login over the HTTP into application. It's find the account and normalize the identifiers and stored hash and normalized parameters and recompute. Okay, so verifying password means whatever the user enter the password this time, this will be again recomputed password hash with the same the time we have used for the register the user, and then compare. If a valid password, then it will create a session for that user. Otherwise, it will, if it invalid, then it will uh, give the login failure. Okay, so this is about the username and password mechanism for the authentication mechanism. So this is what about for this video. I will discuss the rest part about the session, JWT and OAuth 2 framework and SSO SAML 2.2 in next part. Okay, so that's it. I am stopping here. So thank you.